All right, hello once again. This is Jeff Scott attempting to rectify the problems that I've come up with. If you look on the screen right here, you'll notice that it says the web project requires SQL Server 2012 Express Local DB, which is not installed on this computer. Well, after going back and forth and not doing much, I finally clicked the button here that said to continue using this database, install it from the Microsoft Download Center. So I did that, and that brought me to right here. And actually I was one before this, but I clicked and chose Microsoft SQL Server 2012 Express, and I chose to download it. It was a very fast download. It was about 33 megs, so it was not a big file. Then I went back into my project here, all right, and attempted to reestablish the connection to my server. As far as I know, it worked. So, when I come out here, and let me do this, and let me stop the run, and I'm going to start the run up again. What I'm hoping to get in just a couple moments what I'm hoping to eventually get, how's that? Is I've gone through all this, I've gone through all that. I'm hoping to get this blank screen where I can come in here and add some movies. All right, that's what I'm hoping to get. So we're going to see if that's going to happen in just a moment. All right, so I'm going to come over to here and to here. There's my home page. And this is where it blew up before, so I'm going to put /movies, hit enter, and that looks good. Okay? So this is what I have in here right now. And that looks virtually like what you see here. Okay? So I'm going to click Create New, and I'm going to put in some movies. I'm not going to take the time right now. I'll put in about half of the ones I have. So let's put in, I have them in alphabetic order, so all right, and I've got to put a price in here. I'm just going to put in whole numbers. They mentioned that if you put in, well, let's try it with a decimal place and see if we get any errors. So, and there's our first one. Good. So I'm going to go and quickly, in fact, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll pause the video and I'll put in, I've got 16 movies here, and I'm going to put them all in. Okay? So I'll pause the video so you don't have to watch me type in 16 movies. So we're only 3 minutes in, so that's fine. So I'll pause, and I'll be back in just a couple. All right, I've entered in about 15 or 16 records. So right now, this is what I have. I noticed that I did have one record out of place as far as the alphabetization, but I don't really care. Okay, so I've been able to go and enter a bunch of records in there. Each record has, as you can see, a title, a release date, a genre, and a price. The prices I made up. I can come back if I want to, and I can edit any one of these. So let's just assume here, this is kind of silly, but let's say that instead of 12 a.m., this was 1 a.m. All right, and save. And you'll notice that it changed. All right, so I can go back in. I can delete one if I want to. All right, so there's different things that I can do. Again, I'm following lesson 6 here. So I selected the Create New link, and I put in a bunch of movies. The author says you may not be able to enter decimal points, and that has to do with a localization thing. I was able to, so that was not any kind of issue. Clicking the Create button causes the form to be posted to the server where the movie information is saved in the database. You're then redirected to the movie's URL where you can see the newly created movie listing. It says create a couple more movies. I created several. Try the edit, details, and delete links, which are all functional. Okay? All right. let's go where we're examining the associated code that was created in here. All right, so I am down to right here. All right, this is page 8 in this particular write-up, page 8 of about 18. So, the author says, open the movie controller's CS file and examine the generated index method, a portion of which is shown below. Well, let's go to the actual code just because of the fact if we're at the movies controller, we can look at the whole thing. Whereas the author says there's a percentage of it. No, I don't want to do that. Okay? All right. So, we have this line right here that you see in blue. Okay? Now, the request to the movies controller returns all the entries in the movie table and it passes the results to our index view. Okay? The line that you see in blue right there instantiates a movie database context. We talked about that a little earlier. We use this context to query, edit, and delete movies. Okay? All right. Earlier in the tutorial, we saw how the controller can pass data or objects. This was really earlier in one of the earlier articles, using the viewBag object. Remember, we talked about viewBag before, and we mentioned the fact that the viewBag object, okay, is a dynamic object, which means that at runtime, it provides a way for you to pass information to a view. Well, MVC, Model View Controller, also provides the ability to pass what's called strongly typed objects to a view template. This enables better compile time checking, and you're kind of seeing it in here, or you will in just a minute, where we can check for nulls, for example, things like that. All right. So it says in the controller's movie controller.cs file, examine the generated details method. There's the edit method. There's the delete. There's the dispose. Well, let's go see if we can find it. There it is. All right. So what you see here is what's shown in page 9 of the handout. The author mentions that this ID parameter that's passed in is generally passed as route data. For example, in the example here, they show a 5. And that sets the controller, and this is just a comment, so this isn't exactly doing that. All right? So what it's saying there is by doing that, that will set the controller to the movie controller, the action to details, and the ID, in this case, in the comment there that you see in blue, to 5. We could have also passed that in. So instead of writing it like this, we could have done a get that looked like this. So we could have said http://localhost:/. Remember, we're using, we're using, I believe it's 53484, I think. That's localhost: 53484 /movies/details, and that's case insensitive, $ID equal 5. So that's another way this could have been done. What I'm telling you is that is the same as us saying here http://localhost:/53484/. So those two things will produce the same thing. Here we're using the built-in MVC routing mechanism. Here we're using a query string. but they both should result in the same thing. Now, what it's saying here is if we find the ID that we're looking for, we want to return it. All right? And a couple things to realize. Notice here, we're telling it to search all of the movies, plural. But when we're returning it, we want the detail just for a movie. So this is the code that is firing. I don't have it running anymore, but just to show you, this code right here, this details, this is the code that's firing when we come in here and we run the program. And we go over to movies. All right, and with our movies, if we go to movie 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, for example, and go to details, okay, that is the code that's running right there. And you notice when we do it, we're getting the details. We're not putting ourselves in an edit mode because we didn't ask to edit. We just asked to show those details. And that's what I wanted to mention to you. Okay? All right. So next, the author asks us to come in here and to examine the contents of the views movies details.cs HTML file. So again, let's go to the actual code and do that. To me, this makes more sense because we can go and view and take a look at all of the code that's in there. So we're under views, movies, and we want to look at the details.cs HTML file. And there it is. Now, the first thing that happens is automatically what gets put at the top of the screen for us is this line you see in blue. All right, that's an @model statement, and there what happens is the system is putting in for us, it's adding for us, specifying for us, whatever you want to say, the type of object that the view expects. So it's expecting a movie object, which makes sense. When we created the movie controller, Visual Studio automatically created this line for us. This is called an @model directive. It allows us to access the movie that the controller passed in by using a model object. And that model object, since we added this, is known as a strongly typed model object. And you can see here is where it's filling up all of that information. Okay, it's getting the movie's title, its release date, its genre, and its price. Okay, and it's passing that information to what's known as the display for and the display name for HTML helpers, which we did look at, all right, earlier when we went over the PowerPoints. And it's doing this with a strongly typed model object. And what's important about that is it's able to do at compile time some checking. Now, my goal is not to break this. My goal actually is not to break this. It's one of my goals. But if I went in for the price and I put in there for the price, for example, something that was non-numeric, I could conceivably break this. Okay? But by using these strongly typed, all right, so by using these strongly typed objects, this stuff is being checked at compile time. So it provides for us a better mechanism to actually check things and to do some validation. All right. Next, we're asked to go in and examine the index template right here. Well, I guess it's the one in the movie's controller. We're in the movies controller here, what we looked at before. Notice when we go to create, we're returning a view. What does that mean? That whenever we're clicking the create button, we're asking the system to come in and basically come in for us and allow us to create a new movie. When we created the movie controller, Visual Studio automatically at the top of the program, at least I thought it did, and I think it is in the index CHSTM, there we go. It created this line of code. All right. This is another model directive. This allows us to access our list of movies that the controller passed to the view by using a strongly typed model object. All right. Because the model object is strongly typed and it's put in there as an IEnumerable object, each item object in the loop is typed as movie dot, okay, or model dot. You can see that in here. Again, it means we get compile time checking of the code and IntelliSense support. So in other words, if we had to go in and modify that ourselves, and we put the model dot, all right, the system would find the movie in there as an example. All right. Now, what I don't like with what I'm looking at in here is I would have thought that up here this would have created the database for me, and I don't see it. So it says entity framework code first detected that the database connection string was provided, pointed to a movies database that didn't exist yet. So code first created the database automatically. It says you can verify that it's been created by looking in the app data folder. If you don't see the movies.mdf file, which I do not, it says click the Show Files button in the Solution Explorer. So one of these buttons that's in the Solution Explorer should say Show All Files. Then we're supposed to click the Refresh button, and there's our database, lo and behold. Now, if we double-click this database, it should appear in our Server Explorer window that's right here. All right, so it actually should, opportune word be should, be in there. There's our movies database. Here's our tables. Notice we've got a movies table in there that has what? Title, release date, genre, and price. If I right mouse click on this and choose Open Table Definition, then we can see two different things here. All right, so if we come in here and we open the table definition, we can see what the system did. It created this for us, and here's the associated code, so to speak, that it used to create this. All right, so it created for us a table named movies. That table has an ID, which is our primary key, and it's got the identity, which means it'll auto increment, auto count for us. Not sure why there. Okay, it's got a title, and it just made max. I don't even know what size that is. It's got a release date that it made at date time, a genre that it made max, and a price that it made decimal. All right, so it set all of this stuff up for us. It said the title could be no, the genre could be no, if we indeed wanted that. All right, I'm going to close this, and I'm going to come back, and I'm going to right mouse click on it again, and I'm going to type in Show Table Data. And there is the actual data that we added to our table. Now, what I'm about to tell you, this is me speaking. This is not out of a textbook. But to me, one of the things that MVC has allowed us to do by using this MVC in accordance with the entity framework was, rather than having to know a lick about databases, we're able to create an application where we're able to have the equivalent of an HTML form that had fields in it for title, release date, genre, and price, and we're able to put that information in ourselves and then have it immediately be written to the database for us. All right? So going over this stuff and looking at the table data, which we have on the screen right now, is what's on pages 14 and 15. And then on pages 16 and 17, they show the table definition. So I did it backwards. So I've shown you this, all right? And then I went in here and I did this first, but I opened the table definition. And that's what's shown on pages 16, 17, and 18. So we now have the schema of the movie table, and it maps to our movie class that we created earlier. The entity framework code first mentality, so to speak, automatically created the schema for us based on our movie class. So as we come to the end of this, because this is the end of this lesson, we now have a database and pages to display our movie database, edit any database record, update any database record, and delete any database record. In the next tutorial, we'll look at the rest of the scaffolded code, and we're going to add the ability to come in here and add a search index method and a search index view that will allow us to search for movies in the database. And finally, the author says, just to go back to this for a second, the author says, if you want more information, and I would strongly, I'm just basically going over this tutorial, all right? But the author says here, if you want more information on using the entity framework with MVC, you should come in and take a look at this tutorial. Now, this is a little bit newer stuff, all right, but it still is a couple years. That said, it is still a couple years old. In the next lesson, so I've now gone through. All right, so I've now gone through in here. Getting started, adding a controller, adding a view, adding a model, creating a connection string, and working with SQL Server Local DB. I just did the accessing your model's data from a controller. So it's onward and upward to part 7 of 11, which is examining the edit methods and edit view. So I'll be back with that next video, hopefully just one, in a couple minutes.